The National Civil Rights Museum presents the 33rd Freedom Award, October 17th at the Orpheum Theater in Memphis. This year's honorees are civil and human rights activists Zernona Clayton, Sherilyn Ifill from the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and Academy Award-winning filmmaker Spike Lee. Our ceremony host is MC Light. Entertainment includes Deborah Cox. The 33rd Freedom Award, October 17th at the Orpheum Theater in Memphis. For tickets and information, visit freedomaward.org.
Good evening. I'm Vida Jamu. I have the honor of serving as Chief DEI Programs and Community Engagement Officer here at the National Civil Rights Museum. The Catalyst for Change speaker series features thought leaders and experts on issues of education, economic empowerment, and health equity. These individuals are invited to engage with the museum's audience to not only enlighten them on historic struggles for civil and human rights, but also to inspire personal action to combat today's injustices, creating positive social change. In alignment with our health equity pillar in Prostate Cancer Awareness Month, the National Civil Rights Museum has partnered with Pfizer on today's Catalyst for Change program entitled Tackling Prostate Cancer Disparities in Black Men. We are appreciative of the collaboration and relationship. Now more than ever, the presence of social inequities in healthcare is evident. Black men are disproportionately affected by prostate cancer, as they are 70% more likely to develop prostate cancer in their lifetime and twice as likely to die from the disease in comparison to white men. This program is designed to expand awareness of prostate cancer risk, increase the number of African American men to receive baseline prostate-specific antigen testing, also known as PSA, and identify the social determinants that can reduce the incidence of cancer among underserved racial and ethnic minority communities. Early detection is critical for positive prostate cancer outcomes. If the disease is caught early, there is nearly 100% chance of survival. When the disease is caught in its advanced stages, however, the likelihood of survival drops to 31%. The goal is to focus on communities most at risk of suffering the impacts of prostate cancer and to build innovative solutions to advance health equity and improve access to quality health care for patients. This forum will bring together individuals from healthcare, academia, private, public, business sectors, prostate cancer survivors, and advocates to discuss approaches to tackling these inequities. Now, I will introduce the moderator for this important discussion. Dr. Dwayne T. Lawrence Sr. is an assistant professor of urban studies and Africana studies at Rhodes College in Memphis, Tennessee, and serves as the Associate Director of Equity and Culture for the Institute for Health Equity and Community Justice at Rhodes College. His research and teaching are situated at the sweet spot where race, philosophy, religion, culture, and justice intersect. Dr. Lawrence is currently researching the fractured relationship between Black communities and law enforcement, applying the theoretical framework of Afro-pessimism, critical race theory, and implicit bias to understand the complex dynamics of anti-Black state violence in the United States. He also trains healthcare professionals and pre-med students on developing practices to minimize the role that implicit bias plays in framing the patient-provider relationship. Wow, that's a lot. I welcome to the stage Dr. Dwayne T. Lawrence Sr.
Well, good evening. Thank you. Before we begin, 3 expressions of gratitude. First, thanks to all of you, whether in person or virtual, for joining us for this very important discussion. Secondly, on behalf of the panelists, allow me to thank Dr. Russ Wigington, Vida Ajamu, and Joy Taylor for conceiving of this event and bringing it to fruition. I continue to be so proud of this museum and its unique vision to not only be a repository for artifacts of the past, but also to be a catalyst, a living incubator, so that the next generation of Black history is better than the previous ones have been. And third, special thanks to Pfizer for not only sponsoring this event, but for their Change the Conversation initiative, which focuses not only on health inequities in the Black community in general, but specifically on advanced prostate cancer in Black men. We are living in a time when naming and repairing racial disparities and harms is not only unpopular, but it's legally perilous. So the bravery it takes for a major pharmaceutical company to be firm in their commitments to racialized health disparities is something that needs to be applauded. And now, allow me to introduce our distinguished panel. The city of Memphis owes a unique debt to Holly Springs, Mississippi. Ida B. Wells was born on a farm in Holly Springs, Mississippi. Robert Church Sr. was born a slave in Holly Springs, Mississippi. And likewise, our first panelist tonight hails from Holly Springs, Mississippi. He's a physician and scientist who has done community health outreach for nearly 3 decades, first starting with HIV awareness and eventually moving to prostate cancer and men's health, especially among African American men. He has served in various capacities with the Bluff City Medical Society, the National Medical Association, the R. Frank Jones Urological Society, and the Memphis Medical Society, in addition to membership in a wide number of professional organizations. At the LSU Health Sciences Center, he led Louisiana's statewide prostate cancer education and early detection initiative and founded the Louisiana Education Early Detection and Research Program, which provided health education to tens of thousands of men and provided PSA testing to over 13,000 men, 70% of whom were African American. Currently, he's a senior partner and physician in the urology group, as well as an associate professor in the Department of Preventive Medicine at the University of Tennessee Health Sciences Center. Friends, as he joins me on the stage, please give a warm welcome to Dr. Walter Rayford. Our second panelist is the founder, along with his wife, Dr. Terry Carpenter, of Carpenter Primary Healthcare. Previously, he served as an associate professor of natural sciences at Southwest Tennessee Community College, where he received numerous awards, including the Ferris Award for Outstanding Faculty of the Year, the President's Award for Community Service, and the Outstanding Services Southwest Award. While at Southwest, he published 3 laboratory manuals that are still being used by students taking courses in anatomy and physiology. A prostate cancer survivor himself since 2017, he started his advocacy after repeatedly being sent into exam rooms to consult with and give support to those with high PSA numbers, individuals who are embarking on a journey into the unknown. Motivated by the high mortality rate associated with prostate cancer, he was inspired to go out into the community and to talk with and help others, paying for the support he himself received upon his own diagnosis. His goal, then and now, is to remove the stigma of prostate cancer for all men, but especially for Black men. His philanthropy in the Memphis community goes far and wide and includes the Mark Waldron annual 5K sickle cell walk and run, an effort he founded that raises money for research seeking a cure for sickle cell. Friends, as he joins me on the stage, please give a warm welcome to Mr. Kenneth Carpenter. Our third and final panelist has had quite a diverse professional life, centered around giving back to his community. At different points, he has served in law enforcement, as a food research scientist, as a quality assurance manager, as a chemical manufacturing superintendent, and as a certified substance abuse counselor and intake coordinator. His journey with prostate cancer began in 1998 when he was diagnosed, and he will stand before you this evening as a 26-year prostate cancer survivor. You can applaud that, yes. His mission is to help men achieve complete healing from prostate cancer, and to that end, he stays quite busy. He joined the American Cancer Society's Relay for Life as a team leader in 2008, and later became a member of their prostate cancer support group. He co-founded and serves as president of the Memphis Man-to-Man Prostate Cancer Support Group, and serves as a mentor with Zero Prostate Cancer, a leading national prostate cancer nonprofit. He also serves on the board of directors for the National Alliance of Prostate Cancer Coalitions and is currently serving as committee chairman. And if all that wasn't enough, he is a leader in his church, the president of his Neighborhood Watch Association, and a volunteer at the West Cancer Center. Friends, as he joins me on stage, please give a warm welcome to Mr. Clarence Williamson. So first, thank you, gentlemen, for being a part of this event and for your strong advocacy in this area that spans decades. So many of us in this room are aware of many of the statistics regarding prostate cancer. It affects 1 in 7 men. It is the second most common form of cancer for men worldwide. In the US, prostate cancer is second only to skin cancer in its prevalence and second only to lung cancer in its mortality rate. Now, all of this is important data. It frames the context for this conversation. But let's start with stories. So first, I'm going to go to Ken and Clarence. Can you both share your personal journeys with prostate cancer?
Okay, since I'm on the end, I'll start. When I was 54 years old, young man, no symptoms, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer and had surgery. So some years later, after I had recovered, that's when I decided to work with the American Cancer Society, and I learned so much more about the disparities of prostate cancer that I joined their prostate cancer group. 2013, as you said earlier, that's when I co-founded the Man-to-Man Prostate Cancer Group, and got some of our members here today. And I continued to learn about prostate cancer and how long prostate cancer, exactly when prostate cancer treatment really made the turn. And it's really hasn't been that long, under 30 years, when the PSA test was developed and became widely used. So from there, I found out and I learned that there was such a big disparity in the mortality rate, and no sure scientific answers for why. And I began to pay more attention as to what the other organizations were doing. And I became a part of them so I could learn and take what I learned back to the men that I meet with. And about 5 years ago, we decided to take what we know away from out of the room and take it out into the community. And after that, I met Ken Carpenter last year. He spoke at our annual event. And I've just been trying to learn and spread so much information that since I'm retired, that's become my full-time job.
Thank you. Ken.
Well, mine started with being negligent on keeping up with my PSA numbers. when we started that embarking on opening up Carpenter Primary Health Care, that was 1 year that I did not get my annual physical. That year made a difference because the following year, my PSA numbers had jumped dramatically. And therefore, I had to go through the biopsy and all of that. And quite naturally, I had discovered I had prostate cancer. And so in our practice, in Carpenter Primary Health Care, I'm the advocate. I'm the survivor advocate. When my wife, Dr. Carpenter, she's now entered into the room, she would point or tell me room 3 or 4. I already know what I'm going there for. And that is to talk to the young men, because primary care is the first line. That's when patients first find out whether those numbers are up. And as a result, they get into a shell. They need support. So the advocacy and support starts right there in the clinic. And so I say we're kind of a dual team, where she's the medical, I'm the survivor advocate in the clinic. And it's so important that patients get that early on, because many of them at that point are in denial. Some of them don't go to their appointments, referrals to this doctor next to me. So it's a lot of things going on in their head. They rejections, mistrust, the healthcare system, just so much. But I'm able to break that shell with them and have that conversation and let them know I've been through it. You're not alone, and we can talk. So that's where I started, and that advocacy has reached out into the community. She and I both are invited to various churches and organizations to speak. And it's so good that she's with me, because all of the conversations go into a medical side, and she's there to reach out and talk about the high blood pressures and diabetes and all those things. So it's a good team, and that's where we are. Advocacy is just not me. It's from a team of medical advocacy and survivorship partnering together in the community, because we see that void of so much that needs to be done. And that's the efforts that I'm doing now, trying to reach out into the D9 community, the Divine 9 community, because we're not addressing it. We're not addressing it nationally or locally. And that's the gap that I see that I want to try to fill. And that's where my advocacy, I hope, leads. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Dr. Rayford, you've had a storied career in this area. Can you share what led you into your work in the field of prostate cancer?
Yes, thank you for the question. I started community outreach even before medical school in the mid-'80s. As Vita mentioned, initially starting with HIV and educating the church community about the importance of preventative measures. Upon completion of my doctorate and starting medical school, I started prostate cancer research. And as I learned more about prostate cancer, I realized that there was a huge disparity with respect to incidence and mortality rates of prostate cancer. And unfortunately, we've been talking about these disparities for almost a century now. And much of the research on prostate cancer had been done in non-African American communities. So there's a huge void with respect to education and access to prostate cancer information and prostate cancer treatment. That void I wanted to address. And continuing with my research in prostate cancer, I began a very comprehensive focus on educating the community and ensuring that the community in which I reside had access to the same information and the same types of screening tests that were available in the majority community. And that was in New Orleans. And we were very successful in providing education to tens of thousands of men, not in New Orleans, but in the south east region of Louisiana, then to the entire state of Louisiana, and then to the entire regions, South Mississippi, and even in the western part of Alabama. So I've been involved with prostate cancer research and advocacy and education for, as you mentioned, almost 3 decades now. I know I don't look that old, but.
Thank you, Dr. Rayford. So part of my job is training physicians on something that they're surprisingly not often taught in med school, namely structural and implicit bias in healthcare. And so we understand that healthcare disparities all too often fall along racial lines, and we see that in the social drivers of health, unequal access to care, unequal treatment in the clinical setting, underrepresentation in research, flawed political decisions, et cetera. So let me go back to you, Ken and Clarence. How did your experiences with prostate cancer shape your perspective on the healthcare disparities affecting Black men? In other words, how do your unique experiences with this one issue help frame an understanding of healthcare disparities for Black men in general in our systems?
Okay, actually, my experience with prostate cancer has been pretty much the norm for the country. I've always had health care insurance. I've always gone to the doctor when I wasn't feeling well. I took the medication as prescribed. So I did everything that had to be done health-wise, and I had no impediments to stop me. Unfortunately, in certain segments of our communities, that's not available, and they're not able to access the health care. I was detected early, and my treatment is successful. I'm still under treatment, but my prostate cancer is at bay. I live a normal life, normal family life. But what happened is as I learned about the disparities, it put something in me that made me want to do something. And at that point, I began investigating and looking into why, and still haven't found any answers. I think we'll discuss some of them now. But my experience was a good experience. And what I hear from a lot of the guys that come to our group and our meetings, and I talked to a guy on the telephone today, just been diagnosed in May. He hasn't made any action yet. So, I talk to guys one-on-one from other parts of the country, and I give them as much time as they need. We exchange information, and I keep in touch with them, and we try to build a rapport, whereas I can spread information one by one and take an effect on our communities like that. Sometimes I feel why I had it so good, and so many of my brothers don't have it like that. And so that's one of the things that I want to work to try to change.
Well, a lot for me has been shaped in the clinic. One-on-one conversations with patients, seeing patients that in denial, they have these high numbers, or they need to get to the doctor's office and they just refuse to have the conversations with their families, their spouses or spouse, or the family members about their condition. And so, and it reach beyond that, even in what I do in the office. I work denials. I see what happening with the insurances. They don't want to pay for anything much. You have to fight for them. That a lot of them come in that don't have insurance. They're self-pay. So there are a lot of disparities there. The lack of education. I mean, that social economic disparity is there and it's real, and I see it. And that's what really moved me to try to do something about it. We get patients that have high numbers, and some come to mind now that they make follow-up subsequent visits to our office, and my wife saying, well, you didn't keep your appointment. Your numbers are off the chain. I mean, like beyond 10 PSA numbers, and they won't move. And they know that their parents died of prostate cancer. So those are the kind of things that I see. And so it's so many things that fed into my mind, and I see so many disparities. And let me mention one other two, that interpersonal conversations that we have out in the barbershops. I call it that barbershop talk, that men talk. I mean, they just talk, but not really a lot of education about prostate cancer. They're being held back from the families. Nobody's talking about it. And I guess one big thing that hit me was that my mom one day told me, she said, I don't know if you realize, but none of the Carpenter boys actually reach 70 years of age. So I thought about it and I looked and I said, okay. I found out that through research, asking questions, 3 cousins died of prostate cancer. And I was affected. Found out, but I will say that I turned 70 April 17th of this year. Okay, survivor. And I feel blessed. But that information she fed me made me go out and start looking. So I started becoming more educated. And that's part of our problem. We're not educated enough on prostate cancer. And we need more of these type events that's coming up, or anything during September cancer or prostate cancer awareness a month. There's more need to be done.
Thank you. Wow. So Dr. Rafer, let's dig a little into the science. While prepping for this session, I came across a statement from a urologist who said, quote, for reasons that are unclear, Black men are at a higher risk of being diagnosed with prostate cancer, okay? For reasons that are unclear. So let's clarify it. Why are Black men diagnosed with and dying from prostate cancer at higher rates than their white counterparts? Is it social factors, lifestyle, genetics, bias? I mean, how do we account for this trenchant disparity?
I think you can attribute all of those things. Prostate cancer is such a complex disease. And all of those factors play a very important role. Social determinants of health, access to health care, diet, genetics, environment, all of those things play an important role. And unfortunately, we have not dissected out specifically how each of those components are impacting or specifically what role they are playing in prostate cancer. So we do know that African-American men, at least in this country, have the highest likelihood of developing prostate cancer than any other ethnic group. We do know that we have a 2 to 2.5 times greater chance of dying from prostate cancer, but the exact reasons why we don't clearly know. There are some basic biological differences between African Americans and other men who develop prostate cancer, and there's an intense study as to what those differences are and how those differences lead to the development of prostate cancer. But all of those things are currently under very intense investigation.
So let's talk screening and treatment. First treatment, what are the current screening What are the current screening recommendations for prostate cancer, and how should they be altered, if at all, for Black men?
So there are a lot of organizations that have different screening recommendations. So I would just like to focus on probably the more common organizations. The American Cancer Society recommends men to begin screening at the age of 50 who have an average risk. An average risk means essentially Caucasian men or men, any men other than African American men who do not have a family history of prostate cancer. If an individual has a family history of prostate cancer, then screening is recommended to start at the age of 45. And family history is very important because it's a first-degree relative that's important. A first-degree relative is defined as a father or brother. And if an individual has more than one first-degree relative and African American, then that risk is even higher. Then the recommendations to begin screening is 40 years of age. The National Comprehensive Cancer Network recommends screening at the age of 45 for all men. The American Urological Association recommends screening to begin at the age of 55 for men of average risk. For men who have a family history of prostate cancer and who are an African American man, recommendation is to start earlier, start at the age of 50. And if there are more than one first-degree relatives, to start at the age of 45. So essentially, the recommendation for African American men is to start screening at the age of 40 to 45. Screening meaning to get a baseline PSA, prostate-specific antigen test, as well as a digital rectal examination. So that's the recommendation.
Thank you. Let's talk treatment. How do treatment options for prostate cancer vary? And what should Black men consider when making decisions about their care? I read that even though we have a diverse slate of treatment options for prostate cancer, we still see disparities even in the way these are recommended to Black men. So how would you address that?
Treatment really recommends upon, it depends upon a number of things. One, it depends upon the aggressiveness of the cancer. And that is determined by what the cancer looks like under the microscope, one. And secondly, it's determined by genetic studies that are done on the patient's tissue as well as their blood studies. More and more, we are guided by the recommendations or guided by the results of the genomic or genetic testing. And there are a number of genetic tests that are available now. But in addition to the genomic and genetic testing, we're also guided by the radiographic findings. When we look at the radiographic findings, the pathology results, and the genomic testing, then we can determine or come up with a treatment recommendation. And the treatment recommendation depends upon how aggressive the cancer is. If we think that the cancer is not aggressive, and if the cancer has a slow growth pattern, then a common recommendation is to recommend active surveillance. Active surveillance means that, yes, I know that you have prostate cancer, but we're not going to recommend any form of definitive treatment. Therefore, we're going to follow your PSA on a very regular basis, every 3 to 4 months. And every 12 to 18 months, we recommend repeating the prostate biopsy to ensure that the cancer has not become more progressive. For those men who are recommended to undergo treatment, then I put them in 2 categories, and that is or several categories. That includes surgery, radiation, and thermal therapy. Surgery, the more common form of surgical treatment is using a robotic prostatectomy. And that's probably the most common form of surgical intervention for prostate cancer. There are several forms of radiation, but all of them except one can be grouped under the category of external beam radiation. Then there's another form of radiation called brachytherapy, which means that small radioactive seeds are implanted into the prostate. Thermal therapy means that we can either freeze it or burn it. Freezing means that we can place probes into the prostate, and these probes get very, very cold, minus 150 degrees Celsius. And that temperature, the prostate cancer cells break open and die. Heat comes in the form of what's called high intensity focused ultrasound. And the radioactive energy from the sun is captured in a large machine that targets the entire prostate. And essentially the entire prostate is painted with this high dose treatment. And this high heat treatment kills the cancer cells. So active surveillance, surgery, radiation, freezing, and high intensity focused ultrasound are the basic forms of treatment for prostate cancer. And that treatment depends upon how aggressive the disease is. And that's treatment for men who have localized disease. For men who have advanced disease, then the treatment recommendation is very, very different. And then the recommendation is based upon the testosterone, because testosterone, 95% produced by the testes, can feed prostate cancer cells. So the goal then is to eliminate testosterone production and function. And that's usually done by medical management. And in addition to lowering the testosterone level, then there are other newer forms of chemotherapy that are given to men in case the hormonal therapy doesn't work. And then another form of treatment is called immunotherapy. And immunotherapy means that it's when the cells from a man's body is taken and is added to growth factors. And these growth factors are taken up by certain cells within the body. And then these cells are given back to the patient. And this complex serves to stimulate the immune system. And this stimulated immune system then fights the prostate cancer cells. And fortunately, this immunotherapy appears to be more responsive or effective in African-American patients than men from other ethnic groups. So I've given you a whole gamut of treatment, from localized treatment to advanced prostate cancer treatment.
Excellent, thank you. So we understand that African-American men tend to be diagnosed with prostate cancer at younger ages, and when they are diagnosed, it tends to be at a more aggressive level. So the key word for prostate cancer is early detection. So let me open this to all of our panelists. Feel free to jump in. How can we get better at improving early detection and better outcomes, especially in communities of color? Given the importance of early detection, how can we improve early diagnosis in African-American communities?
Okay, I guess I'll start out on this one. Events like this, other events, community events that need to be more often, more publicized, well attended, because, you know, men, for some reason, as I often say in conversations or talks that I have, we don't respond like women when it comes to breast cancer. I mean, you all are really united. You raise money, wear colors, and men even wear colors. You have rallies, marches, I mean, just a lot. But when it comes to the man, we tend to be, as I call, in that shell. And we got to find a way of getting men out of that shell and to talk about it. And my sister, young sister, reminded me that I really started my advocacy at home when I decided to open up and talk about it to my family, which was really kind of hard to do. I mean, it really was. Then it moved over into the clinic. I was more open to talk to men and share stories and learn more and read about things more. So I think the bottom line is to have more events that involve two things. Well, one or two or both at the same time. Screening, education, or both within one event. Screening and education for men.
Thanks, Ken. What he said sounds simple, but the reality is, again, talking about prostate cancer is the last thing that a man wants to do. Early on, I didn't want to talk about prostate cancer. And then as I learned more about how the disease is affecting people, something changed. I began to open up, and it started in our support group where I had to be the leader and get guys to talk. And they talk when they come to the meetings because they're in a closed environment and they're comfortable. But out in the world, men don't want to talk to not even their family. I know men that shut down with their spouses. The communication just doesn't go anywhere. That's the beginning, is for us as men to talk about prostate cancer with our families and our friends, and then get engaged with other organizations. Another way to promote this differences and disparities is for the local government and community organizations to get more involved. And this tonight is the perfect example. When I found out about this, I jumped up with joy, because for years I've been waiting for a larger representation of what are we going to do about prostate cancer in general, and especially in the African American community, or I should say underserved communities, because there are rural underserved communities all over this place, and they don't have access to proper prostate cancer information or treatment. So this disparity touches a lot of people. The government is just beginning to provide funds to look into the disparities. I applaud that. There's an organization called Promise Network. And what they're doing is collecting genetic information from prostate cancer patients. And they want to build a database of 500, and it's all confidential. There's literature on the table outside too. It's confidential, it's free. They'll send a free kit to your home. All you got to do is to sign up online. Then you do a saliva sample, package it, send it back, and they'll contact you with your results, whether you have a genetic mutation, whether you have BRCA2, BRCA1, or any of the other well-known mutation genes for prostate cancer that also affect breast cancer and ovarian cancer. So as a prostate cancer survivor, my prostate cancer can affect my daughters. And unfortunately, I didn't have the BRCA gene, but this information will go a long way to help prostate cancer disparities, because information is power. And I know early on there was an article written about our support group, and the title was The Silent Killer. Prostate cancer is the silent killer. Because early on, and Dr. Rayford knows it, in early prostate cancer, there's usually no symptoms. So you're walking around with prostate cancer and don't know it until it advances and you get symptoms, and then you find out in late stage. And that's what makes early detection so important. Early detection is one of the greatest keys to saving men's lives. And that's what we want to do, is to spread information on prostate cancer awareness throughout our communities. And events like this is a great start.
So I personally think that everybody can play a role in prostate cancer. There's a huge lack of knowledge about prostate cancer in the community. And unfortunately, there's not enough effort to educate the entire community about prostate cancer. So everyone can play a role in one, educating themselves, and then also helping to educate your fellow man about prostate cancer. In most American households, the primary care provider is the female. And when I lived in New Orleans, we made a concerted effort to educate women about prostate cancer so that they can discuss the importance of prostate cancer screening with their spouse, with their father, with their son, with their brother, with their cousin. The academic institutions can play a major role in ensuring that the community is educated about prostate cancer. The hospitals play an important role. Pharmaceutical companies must play an important role in educating and providing resources to educate the community. Government, as what was stated earlier, must play an important role. And I'm very happy about the PSA for Him Act that was passed in Tennessee. But all of us can play an important role. And in America, there's a lot of talk about health disparities, and all of that talk is very, very important. In America, there's always a comparison between African Americans and whites. And actually, those are the two groups that have the highest incidence and mortality rates for prostate cancer in America. Now, if we really want to look at groups that we should pattern ourselves with, we should really look in the Asian population, because with respect to prostate cancer, that group seems to have one of the lowest incidence of prostate cancer than any other ethnic group. So the comparison, I don't think, should necessarily be between blacks and whites, but it should be between individuals who have a high risk of developing prostate cancer versus that group which has the lowest risk of prostate cancer, and see what we can learn from comparing those two groups. But everybody can play a role. But the key is education. The key is improving awareness, and there are a number of ways that the community can be educated about prostate cancer: television, radio, newspaper. That was before these new social media outlets became in vogue. But now, these social media outlets can be utilized to educate our community about prostate cancer, and all of these play a very important role, because all of us have a certain way of receiving our information. I like to read, so you can get my attention by putting something in print, but someone else may like to listen to the radio or listen to or watch TV. So we have to utilize all of these media outlets to educate the community. And the other thing, it cannot be focused only on Prostate Cancer Awareness Month. The focus has to be year-round, continuously, and that's the way that we were successful in New Orleans, in that we kept prostate cancer on the mind of men all year round, and we targeted the churches. We didn't target the barbershop as much, but that's a very important avenue as well. But the point is, everybody, every organization, every institution can play a role. And unfortunately, we don't have enough leaders in the Memphis area that are actively engaging with the community ensuring that the entire community is adequately or appropriately educated about prostate cancer.
Excellent, thank you. So before we close with some practical steps, and I want to hear advice from all three of our panelists, let's talk politics for a brief moment. I don't see State Representative G.A. Hardaway here this evening, but we all owe him a debt of gratitude for something that happened earlier this year. On May 21st of this year, Governor Bill Lee signed into law a bill, House Bill 2954, that was written and sponsored by G.A. Hardaway, that is aimed at removing barriers to early detection of prostate cancer. So let me open this question to any of our panelists. How do you see this new law that took effect July 1st of this year impacting the screening, treatment, and overall healthcare disparities for Black men in Tennessee with regard to prostate cancer?
Well, I start this in primary care, since we're on the front lines of, patients getting those PSA numbers. I guess when my wife, Dr. Carpenter, see that there's a family history of prostate cancer, she can screen, get PSA numbers on those patients and not have to fight with insurance companies about paying for it. And that's their problem. They don't want to pay for it. I deal with the denials that comes in our office all the time, and they can be a headache. But for men who, like in my family, if I would have known, I should have been screened early on with all the deaths in my family. It's something there. And so I think that's going to help out when they go to the doctor's office and that provider see that that patient need to be screened early. She can do it and get paid for it.
Yeah, I want to add a little to that. Thank you, Ken. And, Tennessee is now only one of 6 states in the country that have passed laws giving more access to prostate cancer screening. And currently in DC, the now national senators and Congress people, they're in the process of trying to pass a bill to do the same thing nationwide. Earlier this year, Senators Cory Booker and John Bozeman, nonpartisan bill, they passed a bill similar to the PSA screening for him. So things are changing in politics. It's taken a while, but things are changing in politics to give more access to health screening in the underserved communities. And I applaud that. And I think part of this is the advocacy that we're pushing it. Advocacy pushes it. If our politicians don't hear from us, we don't exist. They have to hear from us to know what we want, and then we might get it. Another thing happened this year was there was $2 million more appropriated for prostate cancer treatment for the CDC than we got last year. So things are happening, but only because we're demanding that something changes.
So I agree with the earlier statements. This PSA for Him Act, which was recently passed, really improves access to care, and it removes the barrier of copays and other costs associated with prostate cancer screening for men at high risk for this disease. And cost is a major barrier for participating in any type of health screening program, and this legislation helps to remove that cost barrier. But also key is, again, educating the community about the importance of prostate cancer screening, because if men are unaware of the importance of screening, they may not take advantage of this new legislation. And a major goal as I stated earlier, all of us can play a role, but the major goal is to improve education. And with improving education, then we can increase access to health care.
Excellent, thank you. One more question before we move to our Q&A portion, and I'd like each of you to answer this in turn. For the Black men in our in-person and virtual audiences, and for those in the audience who have Black men in their lives that they love, what one piece of practical advice do you want to offer?
I probably sound like an old record now, right? And that is educate yourself as best you can about the importance of prostate cancer. And this cancer is taking us out. We have in America the highest likelihood of developing prostate cancer, and the second leading cause of death. And unfortunately, men are dying unnecessarily from this disease. And when men die unnecessarily, they leave their spouse behind, they leave their kids behind for others to take care of. And that's just really not the picture that we really want. So let's increase our knowledge about prostate cancer. And what Ken has talked about, he did not talk about or had some reluctance of talking about prostate cancer in his family. You know, we must overcome the fear about talking about prostate cancer. And there's a lot of embarrassment some people feel. But I think the big thing is when I tell a person they have prostate cancer, initially, they don't hear a thing that I'm saying because they are focusing on, one, am I going to live? You know, what am I going to do with, with my financial resources? How am I, what's going to happen with my family, et cetera. But the key is learning as much about prostate cancer as you can, such that we can have 26-year survivors like we have. And if we detect prostate cancer early, there's a 100% chance of survival. And unfortunately, if prostate cancer is detected, once it has gotten outside of the prostate gland, then we can contain it, but it's very, very difficult to cure it. So education is key.
I will always find time when I talk to guys with these high numbers and in denial. I try to stress the importance of them not falling victim like Dexter King, O.J. Simpson, and so many others. Bill Walton recently, pro basketball player, and also some of the advocates, that's out there that's speaking out. Colin Powell, there's a list of them. And I try to inform them that many have died, but if you talk, become more educated, and bond with your family, because that's going to be the key, having somebody to lean on and talk to that will hear you out and support you. Because sometimes that the man, we don't feel whether that support is going to come. We worry, as you mentioned, about the family. We worry the finances, or whether their wife is going to be able to manage a life with you through this. Okay, it's just so much that goes into a man's head. And so I try to remind them that bond and get that family support and not fall victim like many others have in this country.
I'm going to bring up something that hasn't been mentioned yet, but the first thing that men feel when they get this message that they have prostate cancer is what Dr. Rafords said, fear. And one of the other things that they think about is sex. I can't have sex no more. Men die because of that. You know, and but that's the male species, fear of the unknown and fear that he's not going to be a man anymore. Well, there's 3.3 million men in this country living with prostate cancer. So that says a lot. You got two of them right here, and there's some in the audience. So life doesn't end when they get prostate cancer, and they need to know that. And that's a message that, like Dr. Rayford said, we all need to spread, because this conception that prostate cancer is an old man's disease, that's old knowledge. That went out the door a long time ago. Men are diagnosed and treated in late 30s, mid 40s, early 50s every day. And these are men that got a lot more life to live, and men that have a lot more economic prowess to support their family with. So we all need to spread the word about prostate cancer, but as men, we need to not be afraid. We need to stand up and be men. And sometimes that's a hard one to talk about, but Ken and I and Dr. Rayford, we try to tell men that. We try to get men to see the bright side, not the dark side, because there's always a bright side.
Can I just add one thing to what was just said? I remember very vividly when I was in New Orleans, I was on a TV with my surrogate father, and he, being a prostate cancer survivor, very bluntly and accurately stated that the best direction that a man will experience is at rigor mortis. But at that point, that erection is useless. So we want to make sure that a man does not experience that best erection anytime soon. But the point is, there are a number of things that we as urologists, we as physicians can do to restore erections if it is lost. And all erections are not lost with prostate cancer treatment. If it's lost, there are a number of things that we can do to restore it. And in many instances, improve it from where it was at the time of diagnosis. And one of the things I tell men oftentimes, your erection ain't that good anyway. So let's not focus on that. Let's just focus on living. And if some of the spouses are with the man, you know, they may not say anything aloud, but they're shaking that head affirmatively. So the focus should be on living as opposed to getting an erection.
Excellent. Thank you for modeling the transparency necessary for this discussion and contributing to the destigmatization of prostate cancer. As I said earlier, on this stage are three men who have decades of experience, personal and professional, in the area of prostate cancer. I hope you know it is rare to have access to this much wisdom in one room. And so to that end, we want to give you all a chance to engage them. So right now, we're going to move to our Q&A portion, and we invite you all to pose questions to the entire panel if you want to ask a question of someone in particular. But now for the next 15 or so minutes, the floor is open. Someone will have a microphone, so if you raise your hand, they'll bring it to you, and feel free to engage our excellent panel. Any questions?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Michael. I'm a licensed insurance agent. I just want to remind everyone that, you know, in the new insurance, along with Obamacare passing in 2014 or 16, there is something called a wellness benefit annual physical, and it's actually free, built into the insurance. And there are recommendations at certain ages for what you can get when you go get that done. And more than likely, if you're over 40, 45, 50, prostate exam in men are part of that situation, free of charge.
Thank you, Michael.
My name is Adrian Ward. I'd like to know the PSA numbers. What's the low end, what's the high end, what's the best number?
So my recommendation is a PSA of 2.5 or greater is abnormal. And that number is also consistent with the recommendation of the American Cancer Society. There are some individuals who, for African American men, are even lowering that value to 2 or 1.5. The NCCN recommendation is 3 or higher. So looking at all of the recommendations, if your value is less than 2.5, then the recommendation is for you to get annual prostate cancer screening. If that value is greater than 2.5, then you should give some consideration to undergoing a biopsy of your prostate to ensure that you don't have prostate cancer.
Thank you. Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you. My name is Michael. What if you carried the symptoms for over 2 years and you finally made the step to go see a primary and you're still lacking in more of a person? I know you all are scientists, and sometimes I look at things that maybe it's God's way, but I've carried the symptoms for over 2 years. And when do you see an effect of it, of taking over your body or something, more than when it's outside of the prostate more than anything?
So I think both of the prostate cancer survivors mentioned earlier that when they were diagnosed with prostate cancer, they actually had absolutely no symptom at all. And that's what we commonly see. Now, there is something called an enlarged prostate. And men with an enlarged prostate, they have both irritative and obstructive voiding symptoms. Irritating symptoms being they urinate frequently, they rush to get to the bathroom, and then they start waking up at night several times to use the bathroom. Obstructive symptoms mean that it's becoming more and more difficult to use the bathroom. They have to strain to urinate. They have to wait a few seconds before the urination starts. They don't feel like they empty their bladder completely. And after they finish urinating, it dribbles. It still leaks on them. Those are the obstructive symptoms. Now, those are the symptoms more commonly seen in men who have an enlarged prostate. However, they can also be seen in men who have prostate cancer. So the key is, if you have any of those symptoms, you should be evaluated. Now, men who have advanced prostate cancer can have those symptoms and more. And the more symptoms include pain in the pelvic area, more difficulty urinating. They can experience bone pain, and they can also lose control of their bowel and start having problems with diarrhea and constipation. So if you experience any of these symptoms, you should be evaluated by a physician and possibly referred to a urologist.
Thank you, Michael.
Just want to thank all of the panelists, of course, for the information that's being shared. I'm always amazed at the family unit and generally what fathers find out could potentially impact their daughters sometimes encourages them to really kind of be a little bit more intentional about their own health. And I heard mentioned earlier, of course, the piece around, having prostate cancer and that potentially being an indicator or increasing the likelihood of ovarian cancers or cancers that may affect their daughters. Can you all speak more about that?
So yes, 10 to 15% of prostate cancer is hereditary. And we know of about at least 20 genes that are involved in prostate cancer development and progression. Now, hereditary means extends beyond just prostate cancer. And there are 3 other cancers that if they are commonly found in a family, then that increases your risk of developing any of these three types of cancers. So in addition to prostate cancer, you have breast cancer, ovarian cancer, and pancreatic cancer. So if a family has any of those three types of cancers, then particularly a man, then his risk of having a genetic abnormality is increased, and his risk of having prostate cancer is increased. For a female, if there's a risk, if there's a high incidence of prostate cancer, pancreatic cancer, ovarian, and breast cancer, then they should be followed much more closely to ensure that they don't have either of those cancers also.
I mentioned earlier that I've had 3 cousins to pass, actually on my father's side. But I don't know if there's a link to anything else but any other cancer. But I will say that my brother died at 59 of brain cancer, and my father died of throat cancer. And I started asking my mother questions to see what she knows. And she said, well, your grandmother I never met had cancer. So there's a history of cancer that runs throughout my family that, I put everybody on alert, make sure, and even the girls, which have been blessed to not even show any signs of breast cancer or any other forms of cancer. But we always have to be on alert that it's looming, that gene is in our family, and it's deadly for those that don't really pay attention to it.
And it's kind of ironic. We got this black man up here, and cancer was rampant in my family also. After I was diagnosed with prostate cancer, 2 of my brothers got diagnosed with prostate cancer. One since then passed away from heart disease, and my other brother's right here with me, my big brother. And but the same, cancer. When I was growing up, I had a lot of older uncles and aunts, and I went to a lot of funerals. Nobody talked about what they died from, except toward the end when I got to be older. I had an uncle, and he died from what I thought was stomach cancer. After I got diagnosed, my mother let me know he died from prostate cancer. And all of my father died from lung cancer, but he was a smoker. But all of his brothers died from different kinds of cancer. But lo and behold, my genetic testing didn't show any abnormalities in my genes, but yet and still cancer runs all through my family. So there's a lot of unknowns genetically about cancer. And that's why all this research needs to be done to find out more.
Thank you. Thank you, Orlando.
I knew he looked familiar. I was just looking at him and I said, he does look familiar.
But I was first. He's got it from me. The good looks.
Yeah. So we have time for one more question. We'll have a reception afterward. And if you don't get a chance to have your question posed now, feel free to come up to one of us at the reception. But time for one more question.
Great segment. I'm Dr. Carpenter. I'm the wife of Kenneth Carpenter. But one of the things I want to say in primary care, one of the things that I face in primary care is men, they will let me do the blood work, check the PSA, but they will not let me do that digital rectal exam. So Dr. Rayford, would you please just kind of reiterate the importance of getting the digital rectal exam?
Yes, let me tell you a way that you can get them to allow you to do the digital rectal examination. Just tell them just one thing. Tell them the new recommendations for prostate cancer screening is to use 2 digits instead of 1 if it goes to the urologist. But if you let me do it, I'll just use 1 digit. Okay.
So you see how small my hand is, because that's what I do. I put up my
Right.
one little finger. So you see how small my finger is? It's not that bad.
but all seriousness, it's the combination of the blood test and the digital rectal examination.
Exactly.
Matter of fact, that's the recommendation now.
Yeah.
But I fortunately I'm a part of the National Prostate Cancer Roundtable, which was just launched 2 weeks ago in Washington. And at that table, there is a lot of discussion about eliminating the rectal examination as part of the screening in the future. But now the recommendation is the combination of the rectal examination and the blood test.
And I just want to say thank you to Dr. Rafer. I send 95% of my patients to you. I refer to you. So thank you.
No, I should say thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Carpenter. Can we have a round of applause for this amazing panel? And while you're clapping, and now to offer closing remarks, please join me in welcoming the president of the National Civil Rights Museum, Dr. Russ Wigington.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Loynes, and thank you to our panelists for their insight, their wisdom, their courage. This is what we try to do at the National Civil Rights Museum. We have hard conversations of all types, but we do it through the lens of care and civility and humanity. And when you think about the history of the civil rights movement, you think about its relevance today, those are all very important factors. Having hard conversations, having conversations about each other, lifting up health equity in the way that we are trying to do at the museum, and the way these gentlemen portrayed it is refreshing. It's refreshing when you're talking about hard topics. It's important to have people who will look you in the face and said, I've been there and I'll go there with you. And we are so grateful for this outstanding panel. We're so grateful for Pfizer and their support, as has been articulated, having the courage to stand in this role, recognizing that perhaps historically there have been questions about the role that communities have with companies and organizations and corporations. One of the ways you develop trust is that you raise your hand first and you demonstrate and practice what you preach. So Pfizer, thank you so much for the work that you've done. We would be happy to have all of you join us who are here physically to join us for a reception out just outside these doors. And for the people online, thank you for being with us this evening for this very important conversation. Good evening.